Hey everyone, it's Chris, and I'm about to start a new series on the Warlock. And I'm going to be doing a lot of videos on the Warlock. I'm going to cover all the subclasses. I'm going to cover multi-classing. Today, I'm going to be covering the Invocations. And there are 28 Invocations in the new Player's Handbook that I'm going to be covering in this video. That is going to take enough time. And there are invocations that I will not be covering in this video because they are in previous sources and I've already talked about them in previous videos. There will probably be builds that I do in the future that access some old stuff. The new stuff, I'd say overall is better. Like if I am making a Warlock and I want the best invocations, I'm going to the Player's Handbook. That's where they are. So we're going to be looking at all 28 today. I'm going to be rating them. I'm going to give them all a rating between 1 and 5 stars, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to present them in an order that the Player's Handbook doesn't present them. I'm going to present them in the order in which you can take them. And this is a pet peeve of mine for the new Player's Handbook is if I am looking for an invocation and I'm a second level Warlock, I have to flip back and forth between the invocations because they're all presented alphabetically, regardless of what level you can select them at, which is annoying. So in this video, I'm going to go through them in the order that you can select them. The other thing I should mention is that there is a pact from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything called the Pact of the Talisman. It had some associated invocations with it, and I will not be covering it. But I do want to mention that pacts are no longer considered pacts. They're now considered invocations. The idea of a third level pact is now removed from the game, but the invocations that used to be pacts are now available at level 1. If you want to do Pact of the Talisman, because it didn't end up in the 2024 Player's Handbook, you have to talk to your DM. Because you don't get a pact anymore. So you have to talk to your DM and make sure that they're okay treating it as an invocation. As somebody who does online videos, who sometimes gives advice, I would say if you are a DM and you're worried about Pact of the Talisman being an invocation, I think it's fine. It's definitely not too powerful. In fact, I'd say it is significantly less powerful than the other pact options that are available in the 2024 Player's Handbook because they made them all way, way better. So it is significantly worse, but I don't see any compatibility issues if somebody really wanted to play that. And when it comes to invocations, you're going to get up to 10. And let's just bring up the class chart here. So here's our class chart, and we can see here in this column are our Eldritch Invocations. We're going to start with 1, then we jump right to 3 at 2nd level, and then we go up to 10 at 20th level. Of course, you probably will never have 10 invocations, but it's very conceivable you'll have 5 or more. So we're going to talk today about which invocations you might want to select, but I do want to talk about customization because Warlock is one of the most customizable classes in the game, probably the most customizable, actually, and I think that's fairly safe to say. I don't think that's really arguable because all spellcasters are customizable because of spells, and Warlocks are spellcasters, so they can customize through spells. But invocations provide an additional level of customization that no other class has. So if I want to play a great weapon user, I can be a Warlock. If I want to play a great spellcaster, I can be a Warlock. If I want to play a great scout, I can be a Warlock. And if you really push yourself towards any of those areas, you can be extremely effective in it. Or you could play more of a generalist who does a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So because of that reason, I do want to mention that as I go over these invocations, some I'm going to be giving 5 stars to, but what I would not do is go and make a Warlock and say, okay, I'm going to take the 5-star invocations, now I'll take the 4-star invocations, because you will find a lot of redundancy. You will also find that your Warlock isn't necessarily doing the things you want it to do. So if you want to make a weapon-using Warlock, you might want to just take every invocation that helps with weapon use. But if you want to branch off a little bit, then you might want to discard the invocations that I give a lower rating to that have to do with weapon use. And then I think you can do that, and it won't be as painful as losing one of those better invocations. And I have recorded this video now 3 times. This is the third time And the first two times, I just didn't like the video. The first time there was a technical issue, but the second time I didn't like the way I presented it. And what I was doing is I was going over each invocation and I was keeping the star rating hidden so that, you know, it would be like suspenseful, and then I'd go, whoa, it's 3 stars. I'm not going to do that. There's so many invocations, it takes too long, and I was starting to annoy even myself. So I am just going to show you the star ratings right away, and then I'm going to explain why I gave them the star rating I did. And when I finish going through all the invocations, the ones you can take at level 1 through the ones you can take not until you're level 13 or 15, I should say, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each star rating and just list the invocations that ended up under that star rating. And the way it's going to end up, I'll just do spoilers right at the start of the video. There's going to be 2 1 level or 1 star features, 8 2 star features, 8 3 star invocations, 8 4 star invocations, and 2 5 star invocations. So they are going to basically average out at 3 stars, but we're going to have a little bit more towards the center, and that's because the invocations aren't badly balanced. For the most part, when I give something 2 stars, it's because I think it's pretty circumstantial. And the majority of the time I give something 4 stars is because I think it's just a little bit better than the 3-star stuff. But overall, I would say most of these invocations are pretty well balanced. And there's a couple outliers on either end of the spectrum. So let's get into it. So we have invocations available at level 1. There are 5 of the 28 invocations that are available at level 1. You can see we're going to start with one of the 1 stars. So there's only 2 1-star ratings. And the first one is Armor Shadows. You can cast Mage Armor on yourself without expending a spell slot. Mage Armor is a first level spell. We're going to find a number of first level spells that you can cast at will with your first or second level invocations. Thing about Mage Armor is, first off, you normally can cast it on somebody else. So they've added a restriction on it. And the second thing is that Mage Armor isn't that great a spell. And the third one is that Warlocks probably don't need it. Warlocks have light armor, so they can wear studded leather. And, you know, Mage Armor gives you a 13 plus your dexterity armor class, and light armor is going to give you a 12 plus your dexterity armor class. So a difference of 1. And I've got to take an invocation for that. And once I start getting magical armors, then Mage Armor might actually be worse than the armor I can wear. So I just don't think it's worth it. I don't see taking Armor of Shadows. If I really, want to worry about my defense, I'm just going to put on studded leather, which is cheap enough that you can afford it at level 1. So your starting character is going to have the 12 plus dexterity armor class. And never mind the fact that you can get your armor class much, much higher through armor dipping. So if you were to multi-class into another class for 1 level that has armor and shield proficiencies, you can get a much higher armor class than light armor or mage armor would give you. Then we have Eldritch Mind, and you can see I've given it 3 stars. This gives you advantage on Constitution saving throws that you make to maintain concentration. This is one aspect of the Warcaster feat. So if I have the Warcaster feat, I do not want Eldritch Mind. When I want Eldritch Mind is if I don't have the Warcaster feat. So which one would I select? Well, if I'm level 1, 2, or 3, I might want Eldritch Mind if I'm going to be concentrating on spells. Because I can't get Warcaster until level 4 because it's a general feat. And Eldritch Mind would give me the ability to have that advantage, and then maybe I take Warcaster at level 4 and I get rid of Eldritch Mind because you can switch out your invocations when you level up. The other possibility is I don't take Warcaster. Then I really want Eldritch Mind. And whether I want one or the other really depends on one factor. What are you doing with your hands? Because with general feats, you're always going to get a +1 ability score increase. So if we don't take Warcaster and we take some other general feat, we're still going to get the +1. And if we already have advantage on Constitution saving throws, again, to maintain concentration, then Warcaster is only giving us one other thing, and that is the ability to do somatic components of spells when our hands are full with weapons and shields. And if we're not going to have our hands full, then we don't need Warcaster. We can just use Eldritch Mind, and then we could select a different general feat, something like Inspiring Leader or something like that. And so Eldritch Mind is good for some Warlocks, so it gets 3 stars. And then we have the packs. So there were 3 packs that were in the 2014 Player's Handbook. They're all in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and they're all better than they used to be. And the first is Pact of the Blade, which wasn't very good in the 2014 Player's Handbook. Generally, if you wanted to play Pact of the Blade, you had to take Hexblade. Not anymore. So just bring it up, and you can see it is 4 stars. As a bonus action, you conjure a pact weapon in your hand, a simple or martial melee weapon of your choice for which you bond, or create a bond with a magic weapon you touch. And what this does is, so once you get magic weapons, you're not screwed just because you're a Pact of the Blade. You can't bond with a magic weapon if someone else is attuned to it, or another Warlock is bonded with it. Until the bond ends, you have proficiency with the weapon, and you can use it as a spellcasting focus. Whenever you attack with a bonded weapon, you can use your Charisma modifier for the attack and damage rolls instead of using Strength or Dexterity, and you can use the weapon to deal necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage, or its normal damage type. Your bond with the weapon ends if you use this feature's bonus action again, if the weapon is more than 5 feet away from you for 1 minute or more, or if you die. A conjured weapon disappears when the bond ends. And obviously I've given this 4 stars. Here's why. If you want to use a weapon with a Warlock, take Pact of the Blade. You have to take Pact of the Blade. Basically, you're a Warlock, you're focused on Charisma. This will allow you to focus on Charisma and still increase your ability to use your weapon. Creatures have resistances. We have 3 additional damage types here that we can access. We will have reliable damage. You name the creature, one of these damage types is going to work. We can use it as a spellcasting focus. So I was just talking about the Warcaster feat, and the Warcaster feat allows you to cast spells with somatic components even if you have a shield and weapons. What they don't allow you to do is cast a spell with a material component. That's what the spellcasting focus does for you. So if you have Warcaster and this, you're good with spells that even have somatic and material components, even if you have your hands full. And that is very useful when you want to be a primary spellcaster that uses weapons. So you need that as well. Obviously, it doesn't work if your spell has a costly component, but there's not that many of them, and not many on the Warlock spell list. And the other thing I should mention is it does specify it's got to be a melee weapon. So if you have a bow and you want to use Pact of the Blade with it, you can't unless you have access to older material, because there is an invocation in older material called Improved Pact Weapon that allows you to select a longbow. So that's going to require 2 invocations if you want to use a longbow with your Warlock. And it doesn't just allow you to use any ranged weapon. It's like specifically the longbow. It might allow short bow as well. But with Pact of the Blade on its own, melee weapons only. And yeah, it's just so much better. It's a bonus action now as well, which means we can use it in combat and still make our attack action. And we could potentially switch weapons in combat using Pact of the Blade. And again, make our attack action. Make sure your bonus action is free though, but very good for this kind of character. Basically a must, 4 stars. Now we have Pact of the Chain, which I have also given 4 stars to. You learn the Find Familiar spell, which is, in my opinion, the best first level spell in the game, and you can cast it as a magic action without expending a spell slot, and normally it takes an hour to cast. So we're talking about being able to cast it as an action, meaning you can cast it in combat if you need to. When you cast a spell, you choose one of the normal forms for your familiar, which is all the 0 CR beasts, or one of the following special forms: Imp, Pseudo-Dragon, Quasit-Skeleton, Slod Tadpole, Sphinx of Wonder, Sprite, or Venomous Snake, and these are all better than the stuff you can normally get, and some of them are a lot better. These are not all equal. You're probably going to end up using Imp a lot. You might end up using Pseudo-Dragon a lot. You probably end up using Skeleton a lot. You'll probably end up using Sphinx of Wonder a lot. You might end up using Sprite a lot. But these are all really good forms that do different things. I'm not going to go over all of them, or we'll be here all day. Maybe that'll be a video in this series. If you want a series where I really talk about Pact of the Chain and what you can do with it, let me know. But in fact, probably end up doing that anyway. But anyway, these are all really good forms, and you can switch them. So, you are scouting with your imp, and then, you come across a door, and the imp is too small to open it. So then you go up, and then you use your action, and you change the imp to a skeleton. Now it can open the door. Now you don't need the skeleton anymore and you want to be able to turn invisible. Well, now you're going to change it back to an imp. So really, really useful way to, just change the form of your familiar or replace it if it dies with the minimal amount of time required. So exceptional. And then we have Pact of the Tome. I have only given 3 stars. And 3 stars is not a bad rating. I still think it's good. I just don't think it's as good as the other 2 Pact options. Stitching together strands of shadow, you conjure forth a book in your hand at the end of a short or long rest. This Book of Shadows, and you determine the appearance, contains eldritch magic that only you can access, granting you the benefits below. The book disappears if you conjure another book with this feature or if you die. Cantrips and rituals. When the book appears, choose 3 cantrips and choose 2 level 1 spells that have the ritual tag. These spells can be from any class of spell list, and they must be spells you don't already have prepared. While the book is on your person, you have the chosen spells prepared, and they function as Warlock spells for you. And spellcasting focus, you can use the book as a spellcasting focus, and that is almost useless. So with Pact of the Blade, I talked about how it's very useful, but you can just use any arcane focus. You don't need to hold the tome, so that's not a big deal. The big deal here is we're going to get 3 cantrips and 2 first level spells that have the ritual tag. But in reality, we get every cantrip and we get every first level ritual because it's a bonus action to call forth the Book of Shadows after any short or long rest. And at that time, we choose the cantrips and the spells that are in there so we can change it up. I've got the wrong spells. Oh, I wish we had, the Comprehend Languages spell. Well, let's take a short rest. I'll reconjure my Book of Shadows, and now I have Comprehend Languages. That's what it'll do for you. The other thing it'll do for you is that the cantrips you choose, which obviously don't have to be on the Warlock spell list, and I probably would choose stuff that's not on the Warlock spell list, is that those cantrips are treated as Warlock spells for you. This might have an impact if we want to have those cantrips interact with some other invocations here. And I'll give an example. Firebolt. So you want to have a fire mage style Warlock. Well, Firebolt isn't on the Warlock spell list. So we can't put Agonizing Blast or Repelling Blast or anything like that on a Firebolt. Unless we take Pact of the Tome, then we can select Firebolt, and then we can add those invocations to him because it's now a Warlock cantrip. So Pact of the Tome, 3 stars. And that's all the stuff that's available at level 1. Here's the stuff that's available at level 2, and there are 9 options here. And first we're going to go with the classic, Agonizing Blast, 4 stars. This is maybe the most taken invocation of all time for Warlocks. Choose one of your known Warlock cantrips that deals damage. You can add your Charisma modifier to that spell's damage roll. Repeatable, you can take this invocation more than once. Each time you do so, choose a different eligible cantrip. Now, Agonizing Blast used to only work with Eldritch Blast, and that's probably still the cantrip you want to put it on 95% of the time. There are very specific builds that you're really focusing on a particular cantrip, and so Agonizing Blast is just one more way to give it a little bit of a boost. But most of the time you want it on Eldritch Blast, and the reason is, if we take a look again at Firebolt, Firebolt does a d10 damage, Eldritch Blast does a d10 damage, Agonizing Blast is the same on either of them, until you get to level 5. Once you get to level 5, the Firebolt does 2d10 damage, and the Eldritch Blast does 2d10 damage. But the Eldritch Blast is 2 rays, each of them doing 1d10 damage, while the Firebolt is 1 blast that does 2d10 damage. So with the Firebolt, you add your Charisma modifier once. With the Eldritch Blast, you add it twice. And then at level 11, 3 times. And then level 17, 4 times. So Eldritch Blast is the standard to put it on. And I would never do the repeatable thing here. If you're focusing on a cantrip, that's what you put Agonizing Blast on, and you're done. Okay? Then we're going to go to Devil's Sight. You can see normally in dim light and darkness, both magical and non-magical within 120 feet of yourself. You can see I've given it 3 stars. So there are a lot of characters that do not care about getting Devil's Sight. If you have dark vision already and you are not planning to exploit the darkness spell with being able to see through it, then you do not need Devil's Sight. You might have a dark vision of 120 feet already, but you at least have 60 feet. Devil's Sight doesn't give you as much in those cases. If you do not have dark vision at all, though, This is a great replacement for dark vision because it's actually technically even better than dark vision. If one thing is if you are in complete darkness, dark vision still imposes disadvantage on your wisdom perception checks. Devil Sight does not. I find most DMs don't even worry about that little tidbit, but nevertheless. And the second is this says you can see in both magical and non-magical darkness within 120 feet of yourself. And I presume what they mean is this can see through the darkness spell. But this is poorly worded because there is no rule in D&D. I promise you, because I have been in multiple debates with people about this, and they have searched high and low for the rule. There is no rule in D&D that says dark vision cannot see through magical darkness. If there's a source of magical darkness and it doesn't say that dark vision can't see through it, then presumably dark vision can see through it. But the darkness spell itself specifically says that the magical darkness also can't have dark vision see through it. So with the darkness spell, dark vision can't see through it, but presumably Devil's Sight can. But the wording here is poor. They should have just said you can see normally in dim light and darkness, including the darkness spell within 120 feet of yourself, because that's kind of the unique exception to the normal rule that dark vision sees through darkness, both magical and non-magical. But nevertheless, I assume that's what they mean, that it sees through darkness. And yeah, it's okay for some characters. If I don't have dark vision, I'm definitely considering Devil's Sight. If I am considering, the darkness spell and taking advantage of it with Devil's Sight, talk to the other players at your table. I have now DM'd multiple times where a player takes darkness, casts darkness, pisses off another player who they screwed over. And it created an uncomfortable situation for everybody. So we're taking the fun out of the game. So don't do that. If you want to use that exploit, talk to the other players and make sure they're on board. They can customize their own characters. They might take Devil's Sight themselves or some other way to see through the darkness spell. Or they might take blind sight, through blind fighting or something like that. But if you haven't done that, you can have hard feelings. So don't do it. I also mentioned that at high levels, the tactic is basically worthless because we get to a certain challenge rating of creatures and they all have blind sight or true sight. And so the tactic doesn't work anymore. But nevertheless, it can be an effective tactic at lower levels if you talk to the rest of your party and, the other players are all okay with it. And it's worth 3 stars. Next is Elder Spear, and this one's only worth 2 stars. So it says, choose from your known Warlock cantrips that deal damage and have a range of 10 or more feet. When you cast that spell, its range increases by a number of feet equal to 30 times your Warlock level. That's a fair bit, right? Like, let's say you are 2nd level, that's already 60 additional feet. And you can take it multiple times. Don't take it multiple times, okay? The only reason I would ever take Elder Spear is if I have either a cantrip that has a very short range and I want to increase it. So let's say I'm trying to focus on poison spray for some reason. I definitely wouldn't do that in any campaign where I expect to be facing poison immunity very often. But if the DM says, don't worry about poison immunity, this campaign it's not going to come up. I'm going, okay, I'm going to do some with poison spray. I might choose Elder Spear because it only has a 30-foot range, and 30 feet often just isn't enough. So Elder Spear would give me that additional range. Ray of Frost, I might want Elder Spear on. It only has a 60-foot range, so it would give me a little bit more. And then I might put it on Eldritch Blast, just because I'm focusing on Eldritch Blast, and it's one more way to focus. But the thing about putting it on something like Eldritch Blast is Eldritch Blast has a 120-foot range, and 99% of the time, that's enough. Now, there is 1% of the time that it's not enough, and then you're going to go, oh, I wish I had Eldritch Spear. But 99% of the time, it is enough. So if you take this invocation, just expect that, most of the time, you're just not going to need it, and it's not going to do anything. But the time you need it, you'll really need it. But yeah, if you have Eldritch Blast and that's what you're focusing on, you probably have enough range already, so you probably don't need it even then. So 2 stars. And then we'll talk about Fiendish Vigor. So Fiendish Vigor, I've given 3 stars to. You can cast False Life on yourself without expending a spell slot. And False Life's always on yourself, so that's not a restriction. When you cast a spell with this feature, you don't roll the die for the temporary hit points. You automatically get the highest number on the die. And there's actually 2 dice on False Life, so I assume they mean both dice. So it's 2d4 plus 4. So I assume this means you get, 12 temporary hit points whenever you use Fiendish Vigor. You take an action, you give yourself 12 temporary hit points. They could have just said that, actually, rather than, it looks like they kind of just, try to force themselves into using the False Life spell when they could have just said, as a magic action, you can give yourself 12 temporary hit points. And it would have done the same thing. But anyway, 12 temporary hit points when you are second level is a lot, because you probably have about 17 temporary or regular hit points at level 2. Adding 12 to that adds a lot. And remember, you can replace that 12 as an action, and you're not using any resources to do it. So you took some damage, and in between combat, you just, boop, you're back up to full. You're in the middle of combat, and you just took a bunch of damage, and you're worried, boop, got that extra shield up. And yeah, so very, very good at low levels. Not so great at high levels. 12 temporary hit points. First off, as you go up in levels, your base hit points goes up, and Fiendish Vigor does not improve. So, you got your temporary hit points, and then your regular hit points are going up and up and up, and this just ends up being a lower ratio of your total durability. The second thing is there's just more ways that you can get temporary hit points as you go up in levels. So Fiendish Vigor is often going to be redundant. I mean, somebody does Inspiring Leader. They're probably giving you more hit points than Fiendish Vigor will, so you don't use Fiendish Vigor until you lose those hit points. So it's 3 stars, but I think it's better at low levels, not as good at high levels. Let's talk about lessons of the first ones. This one gets 4 stars. This one is excellent. I love it. You have received knowledge from an elder entity of the multiverse, allowing you to gain 1 origin feat of your choice. And you can take this invocation more than once. Each time you do so, choose a different origin feat. This is the one that I'm going to say, consider the repeatable. You might want this more than once. I just played a character in a one-shot that had a 2-level dip in Warlock that I needed for something very specific, or a 3-level dip in Warlock, sorry. I needed for something very specific. I wanted a subclass feature, but I didn't really need the invocations because, my character was doing something else. So I took lessons of the first ones 3 times, and I took Alert, and I took Tough, and I took Musician because I already had the Lucky feat. And that's huge. That's a big boost. So yeah, no matter what you are, right? If you're a human, you have 2 origin feats. Well, let's say you took Lucky and Alert. Those are great feats. You did well. But Musician is still really good. Tough is still really good. And you might want a different origin feat for some other reason. Maybe you want to do a lot of healing, so you want the healer feat. Or you want to do a lot of crafting, so you want the crafter feat. So yeah, lessons of the first ones. I can't think of a Warlock that doesn't want to use this. Can you always afford it? No, you can't always afford it. And it is one of those ones where I would reluctantly say that if you can't afford it, don't worry about it. And that's why it's only 4 stars instead of 5. This isn't a must-have, but it's pretty good. Then we go to Mask of Many Faces, which I've given 3 stars to. You can cast Disguise Self without expending a spell slot. And Disguise Self is an okay utility spell, and it's first level, and basically you can cast it at will. One nice thing about Disguise Self is it doesn't use concentration. So, if you want, once you have Mask of Many Faces, you can never have your own face. You can always be in disguise because Disguise Self lasts an hour. So, every hour you cast it again and you will always have a disguise. And of course, you can change your disguise anytime you want. In a lot of cases, that's not useful. But in some cases, it's very useful. And I think it's worth 3 stars. And then Misty Visions, you can cast Silent Image without expending a spell slot. I would say Silent Image is a more impactful spell than Disguise Self, but I'm not going to give it more stars because it requires your concentration. And you are a Warlock that, at this point, can only cast first level spells, but you will eventually be able to cast 9th level spells. And are you going to be concentrating on something else? Probably. Probably going to be concentrating on something else, maybe even at first level. And so it is going to have a conflict with other spells you want to cast, despite the fact that it's even more impactful, the Mask of Many Faces, though it doesn't conflict with Mask of Many Faces. So you can take Mask of Many Faces and Misty Visions if you want to really, dive into the illusion aspect. Like I said, very customizable class. So you want to play an illusionist? Well, you can play an illusionist, or you can play a warlock and take the right invocations. Then we have Otherworldly Leap, and this one gets 4 stars. And this allows you to cast Jump, which is a first level spell without expending a spell slot. There is a restriction here, though. You can only cast it on yourself. And normally Jump you can cast on other creatures as well. So why does this get more than Mask of 1,000 Faces and Misty Visions? Simple. Jump is awesome. Jump's such a good spell that I think this is worth 4 stars. And any Warlock wants it, right? If you are a character that occasionally needs to get from here to here, you want Otherworldly Leap. So yeah, excellent invocation. Worth 4 stars. We still haven't got to the 5-star stuff, but we're getting close. We're going to now have Repelling Blast, which gets 3 stars. This was almost considered a must-have pick in 2014, I think, but it's partially because the other invocations weren't as good. That's part of it. It's partly because this didn't have the restriction it now has, which says that it only works on larger, smaller creatures. That's new. And it's also because pushing used to be more unique. Pushing is so cheap now, right? We have the Push Mastery that basically does the same thing as this, but you don't have to take an invocation. You just have to use the right weapon. But yeah, we choose one of our known Warlock cantrips that requires an attack roll. When you hit a larger, smaller creature with that cantrip, you can push the creature up to 10 feet straight away from you, and you can take it more than once. Don't take it more than once. And the standard is to put this on Eldritch Blast for the same reason that you put it Agonizing Blast on Eldritch Blast, because you get more than one blast, which means you can do it more than once. But yeah, the larger, smaller restriction is a significant restriction. Pushing is cheap. It's still okay, though. 3 stars. Now let's talk about level 5. We're going to talk about 8 invocations here. First is Ascendant Step. You can cast Levitate on yourself without expending a spell slot. Only gets 2 stars. Let me explain. Levitate is a 2nd level spell, and it's a good 2nd level spell. So why only 2 stars? Because the restriction they put on it here is severe. The reason why Levitate is so good is because it is so flexible. You can cast it on yourself, you can cast it on an ally, you can cast it on an enemy. But here you can only cast it on yourself. So that's 1/3 of the value. So that's why it only gets 2 stars. Still okay. If you're facing creatures that can't fly and don't have ranged attacks, you might levitate up and attack them from up above. That can be good. Or there's utility involved, but it's not great. Then we have Eldritch Smite, and this is only getting 2 stars. And here's why Eldritch Smite only gets 2 stars. First, let's read it. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with your packed weapon, you can expend a pack magic spell slot and deal an extra 1d8 force damage to the target, plus another 1d8 per level of the spell slot. That's the same damage as Divine Smite, except Divine Smite does Radiant. And you give the target the prone condition if it is huge or smaller, while Divine Smite instead has an extra d8 against undead or fiends. There's a lot of talk online about how Eldritch Smite is now much better than Divine Smite, because Eldritch Smite doesn't use a bonus action, and Divine Smite does now, and it didn't used to. I think Divine Smite is better than Eldritch Smite. You can only use Eldritch Smite with packed magic spell slots. That's why it's worse. So if I'm playing a Paladin Warlock that has Divine Smite and Eldritch Smite, I should mention I can put them on the same attack, right? Because I use the bonus action for Divine Smite. Well, I can use Eldritch Smite as well and put them on the same attack. But if I'm a Paladin, 2nd level, or 5th level, I should say, I have 4 1st level spell slots. I have 2 2nd level spell slots. That's 6. With a Warlock, 2. If I am a 10th level Warlock, you know how many Eldritch Smites I can do? 2. And you know how many spells I can cast per short rest? 2. But if I use Eldritch Smite once, then it's 1. That's half your spell casting, just to use it once. So you just can't use it. That's why it's not as good. Divine Smite, Paladins can do over and over again, and they can still cast spells. Not Warlocks with Eldritch Smite. Doesn't work that way. If you want to use Eldritch Smite, you just gave up half your spell casting. And that's severe. So that's why it's not as good, even though it does a lot of damage, because you're using your your pack slot is always kind of the highest level spell that you can cast, up to the point where you start getting your 6+ level spells. But yeah, so it's just not as good because it is so painful to use. That said, this doesn't get 1 star because if I'm playing a character and I don't care about spellcasting, I just want to be cool, dark warrior that uses magical energy with my attacks, Eldritch Smite is perfectly fine. It's just not great. It's not great. It'll give you 2 big attacks per short rest. And so I still think it's worth 2, but boy, if I'm playing Pact of the Blade, you can skip Eldritch Smite and you're fine. Then we're going to talk about Gaze of Two Minds, and if you are playing any kind of scouting character, this one you cannot skip. 5 stars. And if you are not playing a scouting character, you still want to consider this. You can use a bonus action to touch a willing creature and perceive through its senses until the end of your next turn. As long as the creature is on the same plane of existence as you can take a bonus action on subsequent turns to maintain this connection. This technically has no duration, all right? As long as you keep expending your bonus action, this can go as long as you want, extending the duration until the end of your next turn. The connection ends if you don't maintain it in this way. While perceiving through the other creature's senses, you benefit from any special senses possessed by that creature, and you can cast spells as if you were in the space of the other creature's space or your own space if you are within 60 feet of each other. And yeah, there's basically 3 reasons I would want to use Gaze of Two Minds. The first is I want to be the party scout. And then I want Pact of the Chain, and I'm going to do some kind of invisible familiar that has a decent stealth score. I'm going to do Gaze of Two Minds on it so I can see through it and communicate with the rest of the party. Second reason I might want to do it is because there's another PC that is a scout, and doing Gaze of Two Minds on them will be very useful because it'll allow you to communicate what they see and hear to the rest of the party. If they get in trouble or they need your help, you will know. You can tell everybody else. And potentially, if they end up in a fight that they weren't expecting, if you're within 60 feet, you'll still be able to cast spells in that fight even before you get there. The other reason why I might want Gaze of Two Minds is to use it as a spellcasting platform. Because if I can cast in the other creature's space, that might allow me to do things like cast through walls, right? Because the Gaze of Two Mind creature is around the side of that wall, so I can cast through them. So now the wall is no longer a hindrance to me, or around corners. Or it might just give me additional reach with a spell. Spell maybe has 30-foot range and the creature's 60 feet away, but my Gaze of Two Mind creature is closer. Keep in mind, though, this is your bonus action every single round, so you will not be using your bonus action for anything else if you want to do the spellcasting platform thing. Nevertheless, very good use of this. This is very, very strong. Then we go to Gift of the Depths, and 2 stars. This shouldn't be a surprise. You can breathe underwater, and you gain a swim speed equal to your speed. You can also cast water breathing once without expending a spell slot. You regain the ability to cast it this way when you finish a long rest. So why do you get water breathing and the ability to breathe underwater? Well, because you want to give water breathing to your companions, right? And so water breathing lasts 24 hours, so you can basically give everyone water breathing 24 hours a day. So why do you also have the ability to breathe underwater? Well, I presume because water breathing can be dispelled. And if it's dispelled and you're hundreds of feet below the surface, you got a problem. But you don't have to worry about that. Your party members do, though. But nevertheless, you know the campaign that you need Gift of the Depths for. And if you are in that campaign, you should take it. And if you are not in that campaign, you can live without it. Okay? That's all I have to say. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Let's talk about investment of the Chainmaster, because this one is going to get 4 stars. I can't fit it all on there. It's going to get 4 stars. And here we go. Pact of the Chain Invocation. When you cast Find Familiar, you infuse the summoned familiar with a measure of your Eldritch power, granting the creature the following benefits. Aerial or aquatic. The familiar gains either a fly speed or swim speed, your choice of 40 feet. Now, you have options that can fly. You have options that can swim. It just gives you a little bit of versatility, right? You wanted the medium-sized creature, so you want the skeleton, but you also wanted it to be able to fly. Well, now you can do that. So this is okay. Quick attack. As a bonus action, you command the familiar to take the attack action. I will mention, this is kind of interesting. is that if we go back to Pact of the Chain, I'm actually just going to go right back to it here. Pact of the Chain. When you take the attack action, you can forgo one of your own attacks to allow your familiar to make one attack of its own with its reaction. And then down here at Investment of the Chainmaster, we have, as a bonus action, you can command the familiar to take the attack action. So the difference is, if you give up your attack, the familiar uses its reaction and it attacks on your turn. If you use quick attack, you give up your bonus action and then the familiar attacks on their own turn. But essentially, you can have your familiar attack twice if you have both. And you don't necessarily need your familiar to attack at all. So yeah, I don't think that's a huge benefit. And a lot of the best stuff familiars can do now isn't even technically speaking an attack. Like, for example, if you want to have your pseudo-dragon poison an enemy, and you might definitely want to do that because it's pretty cool, it is now a saving throw, not a hit roll. That means it's technically speaking not an attack, which means you can't use your reaction or your give up an attack to have them use their reaction to do it, and you don't have to use your bonus action to have them do it on their turn. Necrotic and radiant damage. So when the familiar deals bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, you can make it deal necrotic or radiant damage instead. This is pretty much worthless because if you are worried about the bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage on your familiar, you've lost the plot. They just don't do good bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. The only thing good offensively they do in combat is they poison stuff. And there are multiple familiars that are good at it. And it's not just the poison condition. They can make the enemy unconscious. That's why you want to do it. The problem is that the familiars have a terrible DC. So it's easy for creatures to save, except your save DC. If the familiar forces the creature to make a saving throw, it uses your spell save DC. And so now their poison uses your spell save DC. And so suddenly their DC is tough. And suddenly their poison is fantastic against creatures that are not immune to poison. Just like with the Mercy Monk. You have this great thing, but it's a lot of creatures in the game it's useless against. And so there's a reliability problem here, but against creatures not immune to the poison condition, Chain Pact plus Investment of the Chainmaster means unconscious enemies. Very nice. And resistance. When your familiar takes damage, you can take a reaction to grant it resistance against that damage. A lot of the times it won't matter. A lot of the times the familiar is going to drop anyways. And some of the times the familiar is already going to have the resistance. So that'll depend. The big one is your save DC. That's the one that kind of jumps out on this whole thing. And it's worth 4 stars. And we get Master Myriad Forms. You can see 1 star. Alter Self without expending a spell slot. Why does this only get 1 star? Because Alter Self isn't a good spell. That's why. We can get Disguise Self at will, and Disguise Self allows us to disguise ourselves without concentration for an hour. Alter Self allows us to disguise ourselves with concentration for an hour. There's a couple other things you can do with Alter Self, like you can get a swim speed, you can get little claws. Nothing worth this spell. This is not a good spell. It is a 1-star spell. I'd just skip it. There's pretty much no Warlock theme that you can come up with that I can't find other invocations to fill those slots better than Master Myriad Forms. 1 with Shadows. While you're in an area of dim light or darkness, you can cast Invisibility on yourself without expending a spell slot. Only 2 stars. Why only 2 stars? Because Invisibility, yes, is a good spell. But they've added 2 restrictions here. First, Invisibility is something you can normally cast on somebody else. Can't do that. Second, Invisibility normally can be cast in any lighting conditions, and you can't do that. So they've added 2 additional restrictions to Invisibility. Still okay, but it's worth 2 stars. It's not great. Then we have Thirsting Blade, and it gets 4 stars because if you were playing Pact of the Blade and you're concentrating on weapons, there is a way you can go where you get True Strike, and then you get Agonizing Blast on that True Strike, and then maybe the Celestial Patron. And I did damage calculations for that build, and it was better than I thought it would do, but it wasn't great. Your best bet with a Warlock, with a weapon, is to get Thirsting Blade. The other option, if you don't want Thirsting Blade, is to multi-class and get extra attack. But yeah, you gain the extra attack feature for your pack weapon only. With that feature, you can attack twice with the weapon instead of once when you take the attack action on your turn. I will point out here, this isn't the same as the extra attack feature in that the extra attack feature works with any weapon. This only works with your packed weapon. So if you do have a bow and your packed weapon is a longsword, well, you don't have extra attack with your bow. Okay? But yeah, if you are playing that kind of character, the Pact of the Blade character, you want Thirsting Blade. Okay? Unless you are multi-classed into a martial class and you have extra attack already, then you don't care. Now we're going to go to level 7, Whispers of the Grave, and it gets 2 stars. You can cast Speak with Dead without expending a spell slot. Speak with Dead is a 3rd level spell, which is why I assume they say that you have to be level 7 for this instead of level 5. But it's circumstantial. I mean, you know, Speak with Dead, it's very useful some of the time, but a lot of the time it's just not going to come up. And then we're going to talk about level 9, and there's 3 options here. The first is Gift of the Protectors. It gets 3 stars, and this is the Pact of the Tome invocation to get this one. And basically, this is what it does. I'm not even going to read it. This is what it does. You're going to choose a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier, and you're essentially going to give them what the orc gets. You know, the orc, if you play an orc and you drop to 0 hit points, once per long rest, you can drop to 1 hit point instead. You can select a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier to get that trait. And that's okay. It's worth 3 stars. Then we have Life Drinker. So this is for our Pact of the Blade people. And it gets 2 stars. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with your packed weapon, you can deal an extra d6 necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage. That's the same damage types that you can do with your Pact of the Blade to the creature. And you can expand one of your hit point dice, which you probably don't want to do all the time because you have limited hit dice, and roll it to regain a number of hit points equal to the roll plus your constitution modifier. And that's the same as the amount you would recover if you had expended it on a short rest. And the reason it's only 2 stars is because this is not a lot of damage, and the healing is very limited. And so it's okay, but I think you can live without it, right? If you're playing Pact of the Blade and you want to do other stuff as well, like if you want to be Pact of the Blade and you want to be the best you can, take Life Drinker and take Eldritch Smite too. But if you want to be able to do the weapon stuff and do some other stuff, maybe you want the Pact of the Chain stuff and the scouting stuff, or you want the illusion stuff, you can do it. But you give up stuff like Life Drinker and it's fine. You can totally live without this. And then Visions of Distant Realms, 5 stars. This is the other 5-star feature. So Gaze of Two Minds got 5 stars. This gets 5 stars. You can cast Arcane Eye without expending a spell slot. And I mentioned earlier in this video, what you don't want to do is just take my 5-star ratings and then my 4-star ratings because you want to customize your Warlock. This is a perfect example. You don't want Arcane Eye and Gaze of Two Minds. If I take Visions of Distant Realms and I already had Gaze of Two Minds, I probably am going to respec and change that Gaze of Two Minds to some other invocation. In fact, maybe I just switch Gaze of Two Minds to Visions of Distant Realms, because the advantage of Visions of Distant Realms is when you cast Arcane Eye, you can scout with it, and it can't die. Okay? Your familiar can die, it can't. So it allows you to scout out places and you don't have to worry about dangers. And so it's really, really, really good at scouting. Arcane Eye is one of the best spells in the game for scouting. In fact, probably the best spell in the game for scouting. So yeah, it's just exceptionally good. Gaze of Two Minds, also exceptional, because the advantage of Gaze of Two Minds is the spell platform. Like, it's not like I've given this 5 stars and it's 9th level, and the other one's 5 stars and it's 5th level, so this one's better. I'd say they're about equal value. I didn't care about what level they were. I just rated them based on, if I was playing a 20th level Warlock and I had all these invocations available to me, how would I rank them all? That's what I did, and I didn't worry about what level they were available until I, planned this video and got everything all together. So I don't think this is better than Gaze of Two Minds, but it's just as good. And Devouring Blade at level 12. We're going to have 2 more. Basically, same as extra attack. If you are playing a Warlock with Pact of the Blade, and that's the focus of your character, you want this. If you are not playing Pact of the Blade, don't sweat the fact that you can't get this. You can totally live without it. But if you're focusing on a weapon, you have to have this. Basically, your extra attack gives you 3 attacks instead of 2. And finally, Witch Sight, available at level 15. Only 2 stars on this one. So this gives you True Sight, range of 30 feet. This is why it only gets 2 stars. And it's not a 1-star thing, because True Sight sometimes is really handy. You know, you're facing an illusion or something you think might be an illusion. True Sight is going to let you know. Also, True Sight, you know, there's something invisible. True Sight lets you see it. So very useful for that. True Sight also lets you see in darkness. Thing is, you probably can already see in darkness, and you probably can see a lot further than 30 feet, and 30 feet isn't that much. Just dark vision alone, minimum 60 feet, and if you took Devil's Sight, 120 feet. So you're giving up 3/4 of the distance that you can see to take Witch Sight over Devil's Sight, just so that you can make out illusions and invisible creatures. And in most combats, or even out of combat, in most cases, in most challenges, that's not a factor. So I just don't think it's worth that. If I have to choose between Devil's Sight and Witch Sight to see in darkness, I'm choosing Devil's Sight. So that's why Witch Sight only gets 2 stars. And that's all of them. So I'm just going to go through which one's got 1 star, which one's got 2 stars, and so on. And then I'm going to wrap up this video. So overall ranks, 1 star, just 2 of them. Armor of Shadows and Master of Myriad Forms. These are 2 that I would pretty much always skip. Very, very, very few actual builds I can see where I would want either of these. Armor of Shadows used to be the one that you would do with the Abjurer Wizard. So you could cast Mage Armor over and over again and get your Arcane Shield up. But that doesn't work anymore. So now Armor of Shadows is kind of useless. 2 stars. There's 8 of them. And we have Eldritch Spear and Ascended Step, Eldritch Smite, Gift of the Depths, One with Shadows, Whispers of the Grave, Life Drinker, and Witch Sight. None of these are terrible, but a lot of them are very circumstantial. You probably noticed a theme there, that a lot of them were circumstantial. Then we have 3 stars, and there's 8 of them. So these are our average ones. We have Eldritch Mind, Pact of the Tome, Devil's Sight, Repelling Blast, Fiendish Vigor, Mask of Many Faces, Misty Visions, Gift of the Protectors, and you might have noticed these are good, right? These are good features. So the bar is high on Invocations, where 3 stars, that's the list of 3-star Invocations. But as we get into the 4 stars, you're going to see here, these are better. Pact of the Blade, Pact of the Chain, Agonizing Blast, Lessons of the First Ones, Otherworldly Leap, Investments of the Chainmaster, Thirsting Blade, and Devouring Blade. And then 5 stars, just 2 of them, Gaze of Two Minds, and Visions of Distant Realms. So that is the 28 Invocations and how I would rank them and rate them. And that's them also in the order in which they are available to you as a player. In my next video, I am going to talk about the Archfey Patron Warlock. And until that time, I am going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. Oh, I'm so tired. This was 3 videos I recorded, and this is finally done. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.